Hi friends, Father Carey here. This is another Holy Spirit moment. This one, an installment in our occasional series, Scriptural Snapshots, in which I take very brief looks, snapshots, at scriptural passages that are traditionally misunderstood or misinterpreted, or at the very least invite further reflection on our parts. Now, since at least the 2nd century, Christians have assumed creatio ex nihilo. God created everything that is out of nothing. And they frequently refer to the opening verses in the book of Genesis to support that claim. Let's look at those verses. I'm sure they're familiar to everyone. I'm reading from the Revised Standard Version. When God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. A formless void and the deep. I'm not at all sure that these two descriptions are referring to nothing or nothingness. A formless void suggests that there is a vacuum in which nothing yet exists. And yet a void is not nothing. It's an empty space, and an empty space surely is something. The Hebrew for that particular English translation is tohu wa-bohu. And tohu wa-bohu suggests a kind of chaos, a sort of disorganization, a sort of disorderliness, a sort of amorphous waste, but it doesn't suggest nothing. Moreover, the word that's translated as deep here is in Hebrew tahom. And tahom likewise seems to suggest a kind of chaos. It is often used to refer to oceanic depths, the depths of water, the depths of sea. And you have to keep in mind that these are threatening depths. The regular Hebrew word for water is mayim, and mayim is not at all the same as tahom. So, what we've got here in the first 2 verses of Genesis is a suggestion that something exists that God then works with. We've got tohu wa-bohu, we've got tahom. This is interesting for another reason as well. Other ancient cosmogonies, that is, accounts of creation, refer to watery chaos, watery depths from which everything else springs. In the Enemu Elish, for example, the Babylonian creation account, what you have are 2 gods emerging from swirling waters, from chaotic waters. These 2 gods are Apsu and Tiamat. And Tiamat, by the way, comes from the same root as Tehom, the Hebrew word for deep waters. Or in the Egyptian creation myth, you have the god Atum arising from, once again, swirling waters. It's as if the ancients appreciated that creation emerges from a kind of womb water, from a kind of embryonic sac, if you will. And we find that same kind of image at least hinted at in the opening verses of Genesis. Now, what are we to make of all of this? Well, I would suggest that 2 Greek philosophers might help us out here. Aristotle, in his Metaphysics and elsewhere, also in his Physics, speaks of what he calls protehule. Protehule is prime matter. Prime matter exists, says Aristotle, but it has no differentiation. It has no form. It is, if you can think of it this way, pure possibility. It only gives rise to something when that potentiality is acted upon. Or Plato, in his dialogue, the Timaeus, talks about a kind of reality which he calls chora. Chora is also a Greek word for womb or open space. Chora is the birthing place, if you will, of everything that is. It is the receptacle in which becoming arises and all things emerge. What I want to suggest to you is that tohu wa-bohu, or the deep, in the Hebrew scriptures might be analogous to this vast void of pure potentiality, pure possibility, which exists, which is not nothing, but is no thing. There are no things within it until it is worked upon, breathed upon by God. So we have 3 possibilities then for interpreting these first 2 verses in Genesis. One is the traditional interpretation. God created everything that is out of nothing. But I've tried to suggest to you that there is a problem with that particular interpretation. If nothing else, it doesn't seem to be loyal to what Genesis is actually saying. Or the second interpretation is that something existed prior to the act of creation, prime matter, Korah, tohu wa-bohu, tehum, the deep. But that seems to stick in the craw of Christians, because then we would have to posit something existing independently of God and maybe even existing eternally with God. The third option is this. In the act of creation, God first creates nothing in the sense of tohu wa-bohu, in the sense of the deep, in the sense of prime matter, in the sense of Korah. God creates pure potentiality, pure possibility for the emergence of everything else that is. And only then does God breathe upon the deep to give it form, to begin to pull orderliness from it, to begin to recognize through his word that this pure possibility can give rise to creation. To be honest with you, my friends, it's that third possibility that I think is the most likely interpretation of the first two verses of Genesis. I'm Father Carey, and this has been another Holy Spirit moment with an emphasis upon scriptural snapshots. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. God bless.